of dry lake. Our speaker tonight is David Magney, and the topic is the flora of Dry Lakes Ridge. Dry Lakes Ridge is in the Los Padres National Forest, about 16 miles north of the city limits of the city of Ojai, maybe a mile north of Rose Valley Road turnoff on the Highway 33. It's on the west side of the 33, and it's a steep climb to get to the ridge. It's about 4,900 feet elevation along most of the top, and it is very unusual. So past resident, Ojai resident, David Magney, a well-known California botanist and arborist who once served as the manager of the State Office of CNPS's Rare Plant Program, will tell us about the unusual Dry Lakes Ridge, a U.S. Forest Service botanical area in the mountains north of Ojai. It's in the Ojai district of the Los Padres. And as a past CNPS CI member and official wearing many hats and a past resident of Ojai, he led numerous hikes for our organization, kept track of the region's rare plants, and led numerous conservation efforts for decades. As an undergraduate at UC Santa Barbara, David wrote a Flora of Dry Lakes Ridge, which was published. That botanical research made him an expert on this unusual site, which has a relictual stand of ponderosa pines, which is Pinus ponderosa in botanical scientific terms, which were left behind from the Pleistocene, and several uncommon or rare plants. He has probably visited the site roughly 200 times. He now lives in Northern California. 2 months ago, he was in Ventura County, and he led our chapter on a fascinating all-day hike through this area. Also, David Magney is one of the select people who has been classified as a CNPS fellow due to significant amounts of contributions to the botanical knowledge of California. Let me introduce to you today David Magney.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me present to the chapter. What I know about Dry Lakes Ridge. I won't be able to share everything, but David actually gave a good summary of it already, so I can just show maps and photographs, and I'll add some additional information as well. So the purpose of the study was to fulfill my senior thesis, but also just my curiosity as well, while at UCSB. And so I wanted to, assess what the botanical resources of Dry Lakes Ridge were, describe the physical environment, and characterize and map the vegetation, catalog all the vascular plants that occur on Dry Lakes Ridge, determine the rarity and commonness of each taxon, understand the occurrence of the disjunct population of ponderosa pine, and analyze the sensitivity of the botanical resources and their habitats. And then that was published in a herbarium publication in 1996. So just so you can see where we are, the Dry Lakes Ridge is where this is under that star. California is a very large state. Ventura County, it's in the northwest portion of Ventura County. Okay, let's see here. Okay. North central Ventura County. It is located entirely within the Ojai Ranger District of the Los Padres National Forest. It is 8,420 acres in area, which translates to 3,407 plus hectares. It's an east-west trending anticline, inclinal ridge, It ranges in elevation from 2,200 feet to 4,743 feet. It also is the head of the North Fork Matilla Creek, which serves Ventura River watershed. It's also the head of Tule Creek and Sespe Creek, at least portion from the middle Sespe downward on the north side. Okay, now there we go. Okay, got to push the right button. As part of my research for the Flora of Ventura County, which Dry Lakes Ridge was like the first part of it, I divided the county up into bioregions that basically translate into mountains and valleys and canyons. And you can see Dry Lakes Ridge is right here. You can see my cursor there, just basically north of Ojai. And here's a topographic map of Dry Lakes Ridge, with the dark black line is Highway 33 that traverses the south-facing slope, the eastern edge, and the north-facing slope, or at least the northeast portion of the ridge. As you can see, topographically, it's quite steep and rugged. And on top is a series of basins, or dry lakes. Can you see that? There we go. And I labeled them 1, 2, 3, 4, and sub-basins, basically going from east to west as we approach the ridge from the trail, for convenience of describing what conditions are and what plants are in each of those portions of the ridge. Oh, went wrong direction. Okay, let's see here. So I'll just give a summary of the statistics of the flora. There are 71 families represented, 217 genera, and these are vascular plants, 317 species, 374 taxa, that includes species, subspecies, varieties, and hybrids. And of those, 324, or 86.6%, are native, and the remaining 50, or 13.4%, are naturalized non-native species. That compares very nicely with the California flora as a whole, which actually has about 75% native and 25% non-native. So it's a little more pristine than the state as a whole. This is a photograph of the easternmost basin, taken in 2014. It has changed since then. Over the years, when I started this in 1982, 83, the first time I went up there was in 1978. Had to check out what these dry lakes were. And this is a view of it in 2014, looking westward. And you can see scattered ponderosa pines. And you can see the one in the closest basin to us, which is labeled as 1A, has died. Later, I referred to this guy as the monolith. It has now disappeared entirely. And then the trees off in the right side there, those are big cone spruce, Pseudotsuga macrocarpa. So the topography of Dry Lakes Ridge is, like I said, it's an east-west trending ridge. It's approximately 7.9 miles long, measuring from Ortega Camp to Howard Creek on the east side. And actually, so I should clarify that as part of the flora research for the Flora of Ventura County, I've expanded the size of the Dry Lakes Ridge area as what I studied for my senior thesis. So it's a larger area than what is in the publication. It's 3 miles wide plus from Tule Creek on the north side to Holiday Camp down on the south side. And it ranges elevation from 2,200 feet to 4,854 feet at the top of the summit. It's very steep, south and north facing slopes, and sometimes as much as or greater than 60 degrees in some places. That's very steep. And dry lakes is a misnomer. The basins have never held water. Climate, it's a Mediterranean type climate, which is much of all of Ventura County, with wet winters, dry summers, getting drier and hotter. Snowfall is common in the winter from January and March, but it rarely accumulates. It doesn't stay long. Precipitation, at least based on when I measured it back in the 80s, early 80s, was between 30 and 32 inches per year. It may have increased or decreased on the averages. Here's an isohydal map of the precipitation for all of Ventura County, with Dry Lakes Ridge being right here. And you can see an interesting, San Guillermo Mountain has an interesting bullseye. It gets a lot more rain for some reason. That's curious. Temperature ranges. The range is the mean annual range in temperature is 38 degrees. That was based on measurements I took from 1983 to 1985. The summer highs are generally in the low 90s, probably getting hotter now. Winter lows are low 20s. That's pretty cold. Geology, it's all sedimentary. Upper and middle Eocene marine, consisting of 4 geologic formations. The youngest or top formation is the Coldwater Formation. It's 43 to 40 million years old, Upper Eocene epoch. And I say upper, this is if the beds were laid flat, what would be on top would be Coldwater Formation. It's sandstone marine sediments formed in a shallow marine environment. It is quite resistant to erosion and supports fossils of bivalves and oysters. It is exposed along Highway 33 south of Bellyache Falls, so on the lower southernmost portions of the ridge. It is unconformably overlain by the Sesame Formation. That means if it were laid, what we normally found, if we had the layers in a level plane, there would be a gap between the Cozydale and the Sesame Formation in terms of time. After Cozydale, there was erosion, and then the Sesame Formation was laid down. Sesame Formation is not present within Dry Lakes Ridge bioregion, but the Sesame would be younger. The Cozydale Formation supports chaparral, big cone spruce, coast live oak woodland, and coastal sage scrub communities. The next lower formation is the Cozydale. It's 46 to 42 million years old, middle Eocene epoch. It's about 300 meters thick, olive greenish gray to dark olive brown claystones, shales, siltstones with thin inner beds of buff to tan fine-grained sandstones and limestone. It consists of upper, middle, and lower sections, and the type locality for this formation is in Cozydale Canyon, where we sometimes take hikes, which is on the west side of Nordoff Ridge, just north of Ojai. And the type locality, just like for plants, it's where the geologists described this formation from the rocks in that location. It is exposed along Highway 33, the upslope of the Coldwater Formation, and includes Bellyache Springs, Bellyache Falls. So the rock where Bellyache Springs is coming out is Cozydale. And it's conformably overlain by the Coldwater Formation and underlain conformably as well by the Matilha Formation. And here's a photograph of what a typical exposure of cold water formation looks like. And it supports coastal sage shrubs, ceanothus, and chamise chaparrals, coastal live oak woodland vegetation, and where surface water is lacking, and you'll have some palustrine, shrub, forested, and emergent wetland vegetation where water is present, such as bellyache springs. Next, lower and mostly exposed formation is the Matilha Formation. It's 49 to 46 million years old. It's about 225 meters thick, and it's composed of resistant, massively bedded, light gray to tan or brown to buff sandstones primarily. And it also has non-resistant, greenish brown to dark brown, well-compacted, highly fractured siltstones. And here's a photograph of what it looks like at the 33 at the east end, at the pass. It's exposed upslope of the Cozy Dell Formation, and it's conformably overlain by Cozy Dell and underlain by the Huncal Formation. And the type locality is basically where Matilha Dam is for this formation. It supports chamise chaparral, manzanita chaparral, and big cone spruce forest vegetation. The Huncal Formation is the next lowest and the last one that is exposed, the oldest that is exposed, 48 to 41 million years old. It's composed of shale and sandstone, with shale predominating. And the shales are dark slate gray to dark brownish gray, and weathering to lighter. And it has also some limestone occurs as concretions and lenses, 1 to 2 feet thick. And the Huncal sandstones are very hard. They're well cemented, gray to white to buff white. And they weather in angular sub-rounded grains composing of quartz, feldspar, and some mica. And this formation is quite thick, 3,360 to 5,400 feet thick. So it really goes way down there. It weathers readily to low recessive relief and supports moderately dense vegetation. It is exposed on the northwest and upper north facing slope of Dry Lakes Ridge. And it supports manzanita chaparral, mixed chaparral, and big cone spruce. And then we have 2 quaternary alluvial and landslide deposits. It means these are younger. Are basically unconsolidated sands and loams from local erosion underlying or upslope from the other rock formations like Huncal and Matilha on Dry Lakes Ridge anyway. The quaternary alluvium occurs in the summit basins and supports Great Basin sagebrush, cismontane native grassland, and the Pacific ponderosa pine forest. And the landslides that we have on Dry Lakes Ridge is primarily exhibited by the very large Thule landslide. And basically it consists of the parent rock that sloughs off and decomposes into a bunch of rubble. Geologically, Dry Lakes Ridge is also known as the Thule Creek anticline. And an anticline is a folded rock, uplifted, folded, and faulted horst block bounded by small thrust faults, and the Thule Creek Fault on the north edge. And here is a simple graph, cross-section of Dry Lakes Ridge, South is on the left, north is on the west, and you can see how generally they're kind of layered with the younger ones on top, and so all the younger beds have been eroded from the top. And the basins or dry lakes are up on top here. And this is about the location of the Thule slide. And of course, this quaternary alluvium, that represents Sesame Creek right there. Sesame Creek is actually outside of the Dry Lakes Ridge bioregion. The soils have not been mapped or classified in any U.S. Department of Agriculture soil survey. So I had to figure out what they were on my own. And so I don't have any names for them. I didn't get into that depth, but the textures range from rocky sand, rocky loamy sand, coarse loamy sand, coarse sandy loam, fine sandy loam, and coarse silt loam. The pH ranges from 5.9 to 6.4 in the summit basins, and that's quite acidic. And the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels are considered sufficient for plant growth. They're fairly low levels, but nothing's insufficient for plant growth, healthy plant growth. The human history for land use of Dry Lakes Ridge, the Chumash used it for hunting and foraging. How much they accessed it, I don't know. It's pretty rugged, pretty difficult to get there without actually building our roads and trails. But during the Spanish-Mexican period, it was used for grazing. At least that region was. Again, access would have been challenging. From 1850 to 1898, there were some trails that were developed, and it was used primarily for hunting from hunters like the Susquehanna Rangers, who were basically some merchants from Ventura area and Ojai. And it was used for sheep and cattle grazing. And from 1898 to present, it was first established as a federal reserve for watershed protection, and later for recreation, hiking, camping, and hunting as the Los Padres National Forest. It was first set up as the Zaca Lake and Pine Mountain Forest Reserve, and then the Santa Barbara National Forest, and then in about 1936 or so, Los Padres National Forest. In about 1986, soon after I published the Flora, the Forest Service designated the summit as a botanical area. Fire history. The first recorded fire we have for it is the Matilaha Fire in 1932. It burned approximately 220,000 acres. And 16 years later, we had the 1948 Wheeler Spring Fire, which burned 22,503 acres. And it did not burn the summit itself, the very top. The Matilaha Fire definitely did. And that was a span of 37 years between those two fires. Oh, then we had 37 years before the next fire, which was the 1985 Wheeler Fire. They name fires where they start. And it burned about 122,724 acres. And then we had a period of 32 years before the next fire. But before I get that, I started the research of the Flora in 1982, 83, and 84, spent 2 years. And then I said, okay, I know there's a bunch of fire followers. We don't know what they are. And it says, oh, it'd be nice if it burned. And then it did. I didn't really mean that, but it was, I took advantage of the fact that it burned, and I had I extended my senior thesis 1 year to capture the fire following Flora. And then in 2017, we had the Thomas Fire, which burned the entire ridge and killed all of the ponderosa pines on top. The 85 fire killed some of them, but not all of them. It just scorched some of them. most of them survived, but in 2017, all of them were killed. And that fire was 282,000 acres. We haven't had any fires since then. Anyway, so just a quick summary of the botanical collecting history. There were several botanists that have collected at least some portion of the ridge, mostly along Highway 33. The earliest that I could find was by Ralph Hoffman. He collected one specimen, Eriogonum vineum, in 1928. And then Philip Munns collected a little bit along 33 in 1931, or at least close to it. I should say 31 is a little bit early because Highway 33 wasn't really completed until about 33. It was actually known as Highway 399 at that time. And then J.E. Sauter, who was just part of the Wieslander surveys, he collected a few plants in 1934. And then we have Willis Jepson traveled on 33, and he collected two specimens from Dry Lakes Ridge. The most prominent collector from Dry Lakes Ridge was Henry Minter Pollard. He collected from 1944 to 1965 on the ridge. He actually may have collected a little bit later, but that's the latest I could find. He passed away in 1973. And then Clifton Smith, who was the author of the Flora of the Santa Barbara region, he collected from the 60s through the 80s until his death. And then Ike started collecting in 78. And then Richard Burgess has also collected. He's the other person that has collected the most species on Dry Lakes Ridge. He and I started collecting together in the early 80s. Of the habitats, the vegetation, I'm categorized into two basic types, upland and wetland types. On the summit basins, we have Great Basin sagebrush, which is, and I'll get into each of these a little more detail later. Also, we have Californian mixed chaparral on the slopes. We have Chemise chaparral on the slopes, primarily on the south-facing slopes. Manzanita chaparral on the ridgetop and upper slopes. And we have native grassland in the summit basins, Basin 1A and Basin 3 primarily, and a little bit in Basin 4. And there's a small area in Basin 2A. And then we have southern oak woodland or coastline oak woodland on the south base and in the little lateral canyons in the lower elevations. And then in the summit basins, we have the Coast Range ponderosa pine forest, or did, until they burned up. And on the north-facing slope, we have big cone spruce, also called big cone Douglas fir, canyon-like oak, live oak woodland forest. And then here's photographs of the basin. This is Basin 2. Where you can see Artemisia tridentata is the dominant shrub, and the ponderosa pines, and this is from 2014. Takes a while for it to populate. All right, so the Californian mixed chaparral is dominated by evergreen shrubs, and I'm just got a long list of shrubs that occur there. The ceanothus, several species of ceanothus, Cercocarpus betuloides, Frangula californica, and subspecies Californica and tomentella, Fraxinus dipetala, Garrya veitchii, Heteromeles arbutifolia, Kekiella cordifolia, Prunus ilicifolia, Quercus berberidifolia, Rhamnus crocea, Rhamnus ilicifolia, and Sambucus mexicana are just some examples of the more common shrubs in this plant community. Chemise chaparral, you have many of the same species, but generally fewer species. It's dominated by Adenostoma fasciculatum, chemise. The adenostoma also occurs in the mixed chaparral. It's just a rarer component. And we have Arctostaphylos glauca, Brickhellia californica, Ceanothus crassifolius, and its varieties, Cercocarpus bachelloides, Dendromecon rigida, Diplicus longiflorus, Eriodictyon crassifolium, and nigrescens, Eriogonum fasciculatum, the three varieties, fasciculatum, foliolosum, and polifolium, are all on Dry Lakes Ridge. Fasciculatum was probably planted by Caltrans. Eriophyllum convertiflorum, Galium angustifolium, Lonicera subspicata variety denudata, Quercus berberitifolia, and Rhamnus ilicifolia, and Solanum xanthii, which is usually an understory. There are other upland habitats that I can talk about later in more detail, but we'll move to the wetland habitats. So we have three basic types using the Fish and Wildlife Service classification of palustrine emergent wetland. Includes cattail marshes in Narceps and Springs and in Tule Creek, and a carex marsh in Tule Creek, and a palustrine shrub wetland, means our arroyo willow scrub, our mule fat scrub, sandbar willow scrub, and the arroyo willow scrub can include other species of willows, such as, besides Salix lasiolepis, and also lavagata. And in our forested wetlands, we have alder forest in Tule Creek and in North Fork, Matilaha Creek at the very southern edge of the ridge, with some components of sycamore cottonwood woodland in some of those wet canyons as well. Now I'll move on to our fire followers, which, since I delayed a publication a year so I can capture those. Basically, so this is determined after the 1985 Wheeler fire. Resprouters were Adenosma fasciculatum, Arctostaphylos glandulosa, Dendromecon rigida, Ericomeria pinifolia, Frangula californica, Picaringia montana, Quercus berberitifolia, Quercus chrysolepis, and Quercus wislozinii. We have two varieties of wislozinii. And then, of course, many annuals and obligate cedars include Amsinkia menziesii, which wasn't seen before the fire, Antirrhinum kalagii, Calyptridium monandrum, Camosonia californica, Ceanothus crassifolius, Ceanothus leucodermis, Oliganthus, Palmeri on the north slope, and Eminenthe penduliflora, Eschscholzia cespitosa, Gilia achillifolia, Limonia californica, Malacothrix floxifera, Menzelia micrantha, Phacelia brachyloba, Silene multinerva, Trichostemma lanatum, and Turricula perrii. And the Limonia, Malacothrix, and Phacelia brachyloba, those were like dominants afterwards, after the fire. And in some areas, the Trichostemma lanatum came back very heavily, as well as Turricula perrii, which of course is really nasty. It causes dermatitis for a number of people, like me. I found out the hard way. I want to talk about some unique or unusual occurrences that occur on Dry Lakes Ridge. So the Pacific ponderosa pine forest up there represents an extra elevational extent for the latitude. It's a lower elevation than where you typically find it. In Ventura County, you find it up on Pine Mountain and on Mount Pinos above 6,000 feet. So on Dry Lakes Ridge, it occurs between 4,500 and 4,800 feet. And it's restricted to the summit basins of those dry lakes, which has deeper sandy soils compared to surrounding areas. And so I suspect that is the primary reason why the ponderosa pine is able to persist and occur in that on Dry Lakes Ridge at a lower elevation. I should also believe that it represents a relictual occurrence from Pleistocene era, when we know the climate was wetter and cooler, and the ponderosa pine was probably much more extensive during the Pleistocene. And as the weather and the climate dried up and heated up, they died off most areas, except for some patches. There was approximately 175 trees in 1985 before the fire. Like I said, they were all burned in the Thomas fire. And as of this year, we have 5 saplings that have sprouted. So they're not gone. They're coming back. I also believe that they're probably persisting on the ridge because of regular fog drip. During the analysis of the climate, collecting weather data over 2 years, about 20% of the time, the ridgetop was in fog. There were clouds there. So, and if you go up there in the fog and you stand under the pines when they were there, or any vegetation, you can actually get wet from all the fog drip, the condensation. So that probably contributes to the ability for species that have higher precipitation requirements to persist in areas like Dry Lakes Ridge. And of course, it's at risk from a drying climate due to climate change, and if we have more frequent wildfires that take out those long-lived species like the ponderosa pine. Another unusual occurrence in this area is the association of Artemisia tridentata, subspecies tridentata. Also, subspecies Bassiana is on the basin top, ridge top as well, and Rupertia physoides, the scurf pea. Those 2 species, their ranges just overlap at this area. The Rupertia generally occurs along the coastal ranges of California and further north up to British Columbia, whereas the Great Basin sagebrush is from the Great Basin area, the eastern part of the United of California and Nevada, Utah, the Great Basin area. So usually a high desert shrub, and this perennial herb as an understory occurs on Dry Lakes Ridge. And here's a map of the distribution for Artemisia tridentata. And here's a photograph of the Rupertia physoides, which used to be Soralia. That's at least what I learned it as. Another interesting find on Dry Lakes Ridge was Boschniakia or Copsiopsis strobelacea, the California ground cone. I discovered it on the ridge. It was the first known occurrence in Ventura County. And so I published a little occurrence of that and represented a big range extension for that species, as well as a new host. We now know it also from Pine Mountain, the eastern end of it, and Nordoff Ridge and Topotopa Mountain. It's a root parasite on Dry Lakes Ridge, and on Ventura County, it's on Arctostaphylos glandulosa. And here's a photograph of it. And it actually looks like a pine cone. So the common name is an apt name for it. Definitely a challenge to see. So I'm now in the practice whenever I'm walking through manzanita scrubland, I look under the shrubs to see if I can find any Boschniakia. So keep your eyes open. A rare plant that occurs on Dry Lakes Ridge is Calochorus fimbriatus. It is a CMPS 1B.2, rare and endangered in California and elsewhere. And also, I have a photograph of it. It'll show up in a minute. Camisoniopsis ignota, a small primrose. It's only one of 7 Ventura County populations found in the easternmost basin, Basin 1A. And then we have 2 Hosakias on the ridge, Hosakia crassifolia, variety crassifolia, buck lotus. It's one of 15 occurrences on Dry Lakes Ridge, but there's only one population at the western edge of Basin 2B. And it's a fairly large shrub. Well, there's the Calochorus fimbriatus, and here is the Hosakia crassifolia flowers. Also on Dry Lakes Ridge is Hosakia stipularis, variety stipularis, balsam lotus. It is only one of 5 occurrences in Ventura County, which is on Ventura County, on Dry Lakes Ridge. Another unusual plant is Hulsea heterochroma, the red rayed Hulsea. It's in the sunflower family. It occurs in the eastern edge of the easternmost basin. One of 5 occurrences in Ventura County. A few years ago, from the Thomas Fire, there was a very large population of it on the Topo Topo Mountains, just on the north side of the Topo Topo Bluffs. And then Lupinus breweri, it's a mat-forming lupin. Occurs in the easternmost basin. And it's one of 10 occurrences in Ventura County on Dry Lakes Ridge. And then we have Picaringia montana, variety montana. It's not rare, but there's only one of 6 occurrences in Ventura County, and that is in Ventura on Dry Lakes Ridge. It is a fire disturbance follower, and the fruits are rarely mature. So next time you see one, look and see if there's any mature fruits, and if they are, tell Peter Raven. He's studying that. And here's a picture of it. It's a very attractive shrub, although it is not safe to walk through it since it has very, very stiff twigs that act as spines. All right, you get some more information on my Magney.org website. Also, I've created a Ventura County Flora website, and then you can get a checklist, and I will update that checklist with the most current version within the next few days, and you can access it from the venturaflora.com website. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift to some photographs. I have to change screens. Let's see here. Okay. Lag time. Come on. All right, so There's a series of photographs. The first set is photographs of Dry Lakes Ridge from various places, and I'll just talk about what we're looking at. This is a view of the easternmost basins looking westward towards Ortega Hill. And the first basin you see is Basin 1, and 1A is closest to us. 1B is where you see the grassland on the right-hand side. And then 1C is just beyond that knoll of oaks in the center there. Beyond that is Basin 2B. And then those ponderosa pines you see off to the left there are in Basin 2B. This is from 2000, actually this is from 1998. So things have changed since then. This is basically the same view from 2014. You can see that the ponderosa pine closest to us has died. And another one in Basin 1C is also dying. And then one over there in 2B has died. So they're suffering probably from drought. This next is a view of the south side of Dry Lakes Ridge with Highway 33 coming up from Ojai on the left. To the right, I'm standing on what I've named Pollard Point, looking north-northwest. And you are seeing primarily the Cozy Dell Formation exposed, and then the higher elevations is Matilaha Formation. The vegetation is primarily chamise chaparral. The gray color is ceanothus, mostly crassifolius, and the darker green is Adenostoma fasciculatum. And then upper elevation areas, we have it's dominated by Arctostaphylos glandulosa, mollis. This is Basin 3. It's the largest basin. It's also the lowest in elevation. It is dominated by grassland vegetation with scattered ponderosa pines. All these trees are dead now. It's surrounded by a mixed chaparral, California mixed chaparral, and on the north-facing slopes, such as here, it's dominated primarily by Quercus wislesinii and other species like Prunus virginiana, and Heteromeles arbutifolia. In the foreground, we have it's primarily Ceanothus leucodermis. Next is a view looking up Highway 33 towards the highway summit way up here. And you can see the Cozy Dell Formation exposed here. Actually, this is probably cold water sandstone here with Cozy Dell back here. This is in Basin 3, which what I called the mother tree had fallen, and the daughter trees were at least 50 years, if not older, surrounded by false lupin, Thermopsis Argentina, Californica, Argentina. I got those switched, but. And the next is a picture of what's called Bellyache Falls. This set of falls here is from a steady spring that is supported by basically the bathtub reservoir of Dry Lakes Ridge. If you remember, we have these series of sedimentary formations with the Cozy Dell and cold water sandstones, which are basically impervious on the outsides, which create walls and the Matilaha Formation and Hunkel formations exposed on the upper area. And so all of that precipitation percolates into the soil and is retained within the aquifer of Dry Lakes Ridge of the Tule anticline, and is only able to escape in a few places where there are cracks, like at Bellyache Springs. And the water's delicious, and there's nothing that can contaminate it upstream. So it's a good place. There used to be a water fountain that the CCCs had installed back in the 30s, but the Forest Service has since removed it, which is too bad. This is a view from near, just looking a little bit to the east from Bellyache Springs, looking at the road cuts and the chaparral vegetation. Another view of the mostly Matilaha Formation above on the south-facing slope, dominated by chaparral. Another view looking in the other direction, looking westward, and then looking up towards the summit from the south-facing side from Highway 33. And this is a good shot of the Cozy Dell Formation. You can see lots of those thin shale beds, highly erodible. Another view of the south-facing slope. And from a higher elevation, looking northwestward. And this is looking up the trail from the pass along 33. Anybody that's hiked it know that it's not a heck of a trail. It's very steep. It's not maintained except for when the Forest Service sends bulldozers up it to fight fires. I think Clifton Smith actually drove his old Jeep up there a long time ago, but that would be tough. This is Big Cone Spruce, Canyon Live Oak Forest on the north-facing slope, seen from Highway 33 on the north side. And this is a shot of basically the same area, but from further west, showing the Tule landslide, after Caltrans had graded it and removed a lot of the debris. Before that, you could not get past it. Highway 33 was closed for a long time. It was interesting, after a few years after that, it was dominated by Lupinus longiflorus, just covered. Here's another view of the south-facing slope, and you can see on this, you can see the features of the thrust faults that occur along the south-facing slope. A series of thrust faults. And here I'm zooming in, and you can see the Ceanothus is actually in bloom here, so it has that white cast to it, the Ceanothus crassifolius. And another view, a little clearer. If it ever shows up. There we go. You can see how steep those sedimentary beds are with the exposures like this. And this is Tule Creek, which represents the northern edge of Dry Lakes Ridge, with Carex senta. In some areas, Carex is a dominant and creates a marsh. and it's a perennial stream. And here's some Manzanita chaparral up near the top, not the summit itself, but near at the top of the steep part of the trail. There we go. So here's the trail with the Ceanothus crassipodius in bloom. And this was from 2014, as you can tell. Again, in 2014, we're looking at the, this is Basin 2A. It's one of the larger basins on the top. And you can see that some of the ponderosa pines are starting to die here. The basin is dominated by Artemisia tridentata, and with areas of grassland dominated by lupins and a variety of herbaceous species. Also occurring in open areas like this is Ericomeria nauseosa, Oreophylla, and Mojavensis are the two that are on Dry Lakes Ridge. Here's another view of the small ridge between Basin 2A and 2B, looking at the ponderosa pines that were alive in 2014. Well, you can see there's some younger plants here. They were all killed in the Thomas Fire of 2017. Here's me leading a crew CNPS hike. It's basically the farthest person is where the photograph was taken, the previous picture, and this is basically traversing from Basin 2A into 2B. And it is this location where the 5 saplings now occur. This is Basin 2B looking eastward in 2014. And you can see some of the trees are dying. A number of them had died in the past. They were, laying on the ground. We would often stop here and eat lunch. One thing I forgot to mention is walking through the basins. Before you even notice the plant, you would smell Monardella breweri lanceolata, Mustang mint, a little annual mint. And this is in Basin 3, the largest basin, where we have that one grove of ponderosa pines, which have all died. And this is in the easternmost basin, or Basin 4, the westernmost basin, the smallest one at the western end of the ridgetop. And there was a campground here, as well as in Basin 2B. They were Dry Lakes Ridge east and west. No water, so you had to bring all your water. We were back at the ridge between 2A and 2B. Great Basin sagebrush dominating these two basins. Next is a view looking down on the largest basin, Basin 3. And you can see the grandmother tree has died here, the mother tree, but hasn't fallen yet. There is one that's down. And then you had a few large trees scattered about. And this is the smallest basin, the westernmost basin, Basin 4 over here. No ponderosa pines here. Just here on the eastern edge, the western edge, and the northern edge of the basin is where they occurred. And here's a panoramic view of the Basin 3 from the northern edge of it. Here we are back in Basin 2A looking eastward. A little closer view of Artemisia tridentata. In the same basin, Basin 2A. And these conifers here are Pseudotsuga macrocarpa. Here's a more recent view of the south-facing slope with Highway 33 winding down. The internet's definitely slow. It takes a while for the pictures to load up. Again, the vantage point is Pollard Point, which I formally named in honor of Henry Minter Pollard a number of years ago. And so if you look at topographic maps now, it'll say Pollard Point on this ridge. And here's a closer view of the Thule slide and the big cone spruce forest up at the top. All right, that's the end of those pictures. And now I will go to pictures of plants. That's what you guys want to see, right? They're in alphabetical order. Not all the plants, that would be too many. This is Acer macrophyllum. This is Acortia microcephala, Sacapeloti. Adenostoma fasciculatum in bloom, chemise. And yes, all of the big cone spruce survived the fire. They're doing just fine. Next is Amorpha californica. It's ever going to show up. There we go. In the pea family. And Cistocarpus phylogenifolia. I'm not saying that right, I know. Little teeny, little woolly fish hooks. Got the common name right. And this is Arctostaphylos. This is actually glauca. And here's a large shrub of Arctostaphylos glauca. Whenever it shows up. There we go. Close-up of the leaves. Big berry manzanita is the common name. Yes, leaves are fairly gray colored for the most part. Here's a nicer picture of it in bloom. This is our Artemisia tridentata in bloom. And this is one of my favorites, the Boschniakia strobelacea. It's now been put into Copsiopsis, root parasite. Calochortus catalinea, no longer considered rare. There's just too many of them. It occurs on the south slope, lower elevation. And then the Calochortus fimbriatus, used to be Calochortus weedii vestis. Very bizarre looking guy. It blooms in July. So now is a good time to go look for it on Dry Lakes Ridge. I haven't seen it since 1978. Usually because I don't go up on the top of the ridge in the summer. It's just too hot. And then Calochortus venustus, not rare, but interesting one in that these spots migrate on any different flower. They'll be in different positions, and there's color morphs as well. Next is Caliptridium monandrum, which shows up on a basin on top in the sandy soils, and it has stimulated 5 fires as well. Chemisoniopsis, Carex senta in Tule Creek. Definitely a cespitose species. And here's the flowers and leaves of Ceanothus crassifolius, variety planus. And here's another one of it in bloom of the whole shrub. And the common name is called snowball. It looks like a bunch of snowballs when it's in bloom. Close up of those flowers, inflorescences. Next is Ceanothus leucodermis, which goes at higher elevations. Blue flowered. Sometimes the color of the blue can vary from a fairly light to pretty intense dark blue. In the summer, when the capsules are ripe, you can hear them popping as you walk along them. Close-up of the leucodermis, Ceanothus leucodermis. You can see the white bark. And here's what the fruit looks like Next is Ceanothus oleganthus, hoary Ceanothus. And the leaves of oleganthus are finely serrated and has 3 prominent veins and dark glossy green on the upper surface. Next is Cercocarpus betuloides in fruit in the rose family. And betuloides means it's like birch. The leaves look like birch leaves. Next is Coryzanthe staticoides. And then Claytonia exigua. Then we'll move to Clematis lasiantha in flower and then in fruit. And then Clematis ligusticifolia, which is our riparian species, in fruit. Then we have Dendromecon rigida, followed by, now it's Dipterostemon capitatus, ludix, followed by Diplacus longiflorus, sticky bush monkey flower, followed by Drymocollis glandulosa, or sticky cinquefoil in the rose family. We have Dudleya cymosa pumila in bloom, and then Dudleya lanceolata in bloom. Next is Ephedra viridis, green Mormon tea. Followed by Eriodictyon crassifolium nigrescens. And then Eriodictyon traskii. Then we have Eriogonum fasciculatum, followed by Eriophyllum convertiflorum. The internet's slow, so they're migrating very slowly. Golden yarrow. And then also we have Eriophyllum pringlei, an annual yarrow, Pringle's yarrow. Followed by Fraxinus dipetala. In the olive family, followed by Galium andrewsii, pine mat in the rubiaceae. Kind of a cushion plant, but not very comfortable. It's quite prickly. And Garrya veitchii, large shrub in the Garryaceae. Come on. And then that's followed by Hespero Yucca Whipley, Our Lord's Candle. Followed by Toyon, Heteromeles arbustifolia in fruit. And here's our lotus or Hosakia crassifolia in bloom. Kekiella cordifolia, heartleaf penstemon. And a close-up of the flower. Then Lathyrus vestitis. Leptosiphon pygmaeus. And then in Bellyache Springs, we have Lobelia Dunnii variety serrata. Has to have its feet wet. And next is our Lupinus breweri. Lupinus hirsutissimus. Mara fabaceae. Here's the Monardella breweri lanceolata, just the leaves, which are extremely fragrant. And here's a shot of the Phacelia brachyloba as a dominant after the Thomas fire. And then Phorandendron macrophyllum. And here's Ponderosa pines, Pinus ponderosa, variety Pacifica. Prunus ilicifolia inflorescens, followed by a large shrub, followed by close-up of the leaves and some of the flowers, followed by the cherries. Next is Prunus virginiana, which occurs in Basin 4, the westernmost basin. And then we got Quercus chrysolepis, close up of the leaves. Followed by Ribes malvaceum, and Romnea trichocalyx, Matilla poppy, and Salvia columbari, chia, and Sambucus mexicana, blue elderberry. And then Thermopsis, the false lupin. And close up of those flowers. And Toxiscordion brevi, I can't remember. I can't remember. Brevi bracteatus, I think that's it. Yeah. One of the death camuses. And then Trichostema lanatum. Such beautiful flowers. And then ending with Viola pedunculata. Yes, there was Nicotiana afterwards. I just don't have a photograph of it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
We have some questions in the chat.
I answered a few of them as I saw.
Oh, okay.
Which ones did I not get?
From Carol Bornstein. Dave, have you ever seen fruits of Picaringia?
They were basically not mature. They aborted. I've been looking.
From Leslie, why is it called Bellyache Falls?
The water's delicious, but I think it's because everybody was thirsty when they got there and they drank too much. So they got a bellyache. That's my story about it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, that's what Lanny said. I used to drink the water until Giardia was found.
Yep.
Andrea says, oh gosh, I'm not a botanist, so I'm going to butcher this. Have any of the pseudotsugas survived the fires?
They all survived it.
They all survived.
Yeah. Or at least the vast majority. Yeah.
And then what was the white stuff on the leaves of the first manzanita? So I don't know which pictures he's referring to. Andrea? Oh, he's here. Okay.
I'm trying to migrate to the picture, see what it was here.
Sumac, so I don't know who that is. Do you think there's any relevance to the flora of the east-west orientation of the ridges? And then how long before the first ponderosa sprout appeared? 2 questions.
So the east-west trending is part of the transverse ranges, which is a unique orientation for our mountain ranges in much of the United States, but certainly California. So the Santa Ynez Mountains, the Ponderosa, Pine Mountain, Pine Mountain, Mount Pinos, the Topas, Nordoff Ridge, and go further eastward to get the San Bernardinos, and the San Gabriel Mountains are all east-west trending. And I think it affects how precipitation is squeezed out of the prevailing winds. You basically, at the west end of the San Ynez Mountains, you have your highest precipitation. And then when you get further east, it gets drier and drier as you go. Whereas like the north-south trending mountains like the Sierra Nevada and the Coast Ranges, you'll squeeze out most of the vegetation on the west side, and then you'll have a rain shadow effect on the eastern side. You'll have a minor effect like that in our areas in the transverse ranges, but I think to a lesser extent. It took a few years before the Ponderosa pine seedlings came up. I heard they first came up a couple of years ago, but last year was the first time I'd seen them.
I think Lanny has also a question about that. Do you want to just ask, Lanny?
Sure. You mentioned that the soil in the basins was unusually acidic. So I was wondering if that was part of the reason why the Ponderosa pines were up there, if they like acidic soil.
They do. I have a nice big one right here in my yard. And our soils here are slightly acidic. So they do prefer acidic soils. So at least they are. Which came first? What's the reason for the acidity? But the vegetation can affect the soil, the acidity as well, or a pH.
And I do have a question about your website because I went to it before this started, and your page of photos of Dry Lakes Ridge is blank.
Huh. Okay, we'll have to work on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll find out.
And thanks for a great presentation.
Sure, glad.
Any more questions?
Well, thank you, David Magney. That was an excellent presentation, very comprehensive. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm going to stop recording.